Hi, I made this video so I can share the process I used for refinishing Didgeridoo. I had a little bit of damage, and also to give thank you to Beijerinck, who sold me the Didgeridoo. She used this in professional playing for 15 years, lots of concerts, and to Melle Smit for making the Didgeridoo. It's really amazing, and you can do all these advanced techniques on it, like toots and wobbles that I can't do yet. I can do the basic drone and circular breathing right now, which is very relaxing. I'm giving their contact information and websites in the description of this video in case you want to reach out to them and contact Lise for concerts and for lessons. Definitely recommend her for personal one-on-one lessons via Skype or in person, and Melle for purchasing Didgeridoo. So I bought this Didgeridoo from Lise about a month ago, and the last 2 weeks I was refinishing it. Had 3 cracks and also quite a few scratches, and she knew that. She had tape around the Didgeridoo, and you can see now, here's a photo of the Didgeridoo before and one after the whole refinishing process. So I'll just show you what it looks like. This is the bell, the end of it. It's really nice and wide. This is the bottom that had been rubbed against the ground a lot after playing for 15 years. And then there's a few little cracks that I made it larger actually, then filled with wood glue, and then put a little copper and gold leaf and silver leaf. Here's another crack that got filled in. There's a third one. So this is what it looks like now. It's nice and glossy and the refinish natural look. It feels great and sounds amazing. So now I'll just share a short video which I made a couple minutes ago of me playing, just so you can hear the sound of it. So I'm going to describe the process I used for refinishing the Didgeridoo. I'm going to go through it kind of quickly, and I'll include a few notes in the description. So first step was I did research on refinishing the Didgeridoo. I not even sure if I was up to the task of refinishing it, but after doing some research, I felt comfortable, and I also really sat with the Didgeridoo and was really asking Didgeridoo, what would be the best way to refinish you, and also to sleep on it a couple nights so I didn't rush into it. I really just sort of let ideas and inspiration come to me. My favorite example for how to refinish a Didgeridoo or Yadaki was from Dubravko Lapine, and I'll include a link to his website. One way that he would finish the raw wood is polyurethane on the inside, and then oil and polyurethane on the outside, and he prefers water-based polyurethane, and I decided to go with Minwex water-based oil-modified polyurethane in clear gloss. I started with semi-gloss, but then I found that I like the clear gloss better. I also called some companies that sell the products to ask the compatibility with their products with other products, such as with polyurethane and epoxy. And I found that polyurethane and epoxy do go well together, but a lot of finishes don't go well together. And if you try and put one finish on top of another, it will just not work and it will come out really badly. So once I decided which materials I would use, I went ahead and ordered them. I had different grades of sandpaper going from 80 to 2000. I cut up some old t-shirts so I'd have cloth to do cleaning and sanding and applying polyurethane. Used steel wool. The 40 was my favorite. I used this in between coats of polyurethane. And then I already had 2 sawhorses. Used dish soap, a dish brush, 2 1-meter wooden dowels. I liked using the Tight Bond 3 Ultimate Wood Glue. It's waterproof wood glue for filling in the cracks. I used a little mustard oil once I was down to the bare wood on the inside for providing a little antiseptic quality to the inside of the didgeridoo. And also on the outside I used tung oil, and I added just a little bit of essential oil of eucalyptus and bergamot. You generally do not want to combine essential oil with polyurethane or epoxy. It can mess them up, but I was very careful just to include a little bit embedded within the matrix of the tung oil, so it would not affect, did not affect the polyurethane at all. Used some paper plates, a trash bag, some paper for the floor. I worked indoors after I finished the sanding in our basement. I used some painter's tape. I also used some copper leaf, gold leaf, silver leaf. I used some epoxy. This is the one I use. It's a UV friendly epoxy. It does not yellow in the light, which some epoxy does. And this is also meant to be more environmentally friendly, which also means it has less vapors, which are harmful. And I also used a couple pencils at one point when I was doing polyurethane work in a vertical position. I would put pencils underneath the didgeridoo to keep it from getting paper stuck to it. So one of the first things I did before starting was I made a stand for the didgeridoo. This would be a stand for, in between playing it, but also for working on it. So I just took 3 pieces of wood and screwed them together, drilled the hole, and I put a piece of bamboo in the hole to hold it. And I picked bamboo because it's a little bit softer than the hardwood. So that way, if it's a softer material, it will not scratch the hardwood. You could also use a wooden dowel or any kind of stand you want. And while I was working on the didgeridoo, I put paper on top of this stand so it wouldn't get dirty. So I first cleaned the didgeridoo with some water and soap. Use a little bit of dish soap and warm water and a bottle brush attached to a wooden dowel with duct tape. And I nicely scrubbed the inside, both sides, and poured water through the top and the bottom. Actually worked standing in a bathtub just to really clean it out nicely. That removed a little bit of the old sealant too from the inside, and definitely got rid of any bacteria or dust or something like that. Then I let it dry for 2 days. Then the next step was identify where the cracks were. I took an X-Acto knife and I cut along the cracks into a V shape just to make it a little bit wider. I was careful not to make the opening into the inside of the didgeridoo any wider, but I just made a little bit of a V shape. In hindsight, I would have made the V smaller. I probably made it from like a hairline crack to about 3 millimeters wide at the top of the V, and then went down to a hairline at the bottom. In hindsight, I think I would have just removed 1 millimeter of wood rather than 3 at the top, and I still would have just gone down to a hairline. So there's one of the cracks. There's another. That's the third one. So that next step was using the X-Acto knife just to make a V shape. And then I sanded the didgeridoo outdoors on a warm day of 65 degrees Fahrenheit with using 2 sawhorses for a vertical position, and then I actually used a towel on the ground and holding it against my shoulder for the vertical position. I decided not to use the stand, mainly because I'd used the stand when I'm sanding it, then the stand would have been rubbing against the inside of the instrument. So I sanded for 3 hours, and that was the whole process in itself. And I've got a video at the end describing part of the process. And then I poured water through it again in a bathtub, just being very careful not to drop the didgeridoo or let it slip. Just poured water through it a couple times and on the outside, and used a wet washcloth just to wipe it down. Then I let it dry again for 24 hours, and it felt really dry. So the next step was, once I had the fully bare didgeridoo, was to fill in the cracks using a mixture of wood glue, again the Titebond 3, with sawdust, 50-50 mixture. And then I used a little, I just happened to have a little palette knife for using oil color paints, and used my little palette knife and filled in the cracks. I actually have it handy here, so I actually used this little palette knife. It just kind of made it more fun, but you could also just use your finger or a knife or anything you want. It's a size comparison. So this is the waterproof exterior, interior Titebond 3 Ultimate Wood Glue. So then once the glue had dried, I put a little bit of silver, gold, and copper leaf on top of the glue. I already had some, so I just thought it'd be fun to use. And in hindsight, I would have let the glue dry and not put a coating on, but then I would have, after one day, I would have added a second coating of sawdust and wood glue. It shrunk more than I thought it would, but it still worked out great. And then I added a little layer of the UV resistant epoxy on top of the wood glue after 24 hours and the leaf to help seal in the leaf, but also add a little more protection to the wood glue. I then polished the dried glue with the 0 grade steel wool and then the 4-0 steel wool in the direction of the grain, which in this case was top down. So the next step was I put a little bit of mustard oil on the inside of the didgeridoo. I like using mustard oil because I've made bansuris as a hobby, the Indian flutes out of bamboo, and I just like the smell of mustard oil. It doesn't smell exactly like mustard. I mean, it's very subtle. It kind of smells a little antiseptic. So I prefer that as really an antiseptic and cleanser for the inside of the didgeridoo. I just put a light coating, and then I put a coating of tung oil on the outside, and then I let it dry for a day, and I applied it with cotton cloth. And then I put on a second coating of the tung oil after one day, and then I let it dry again for a day. And then it felt really nice and dry, and I wiped it down with cotton cloth again just to make sure it was completely dry. I think if you had oil resting on top of the wood, that would keep the polyurethane from adhering. So I applied 3 coats of polyurethane using the semi-gloss, and I used the 4-0 steel wool in between each application. And then I would also wipe it down with cotton cloth after doing the steel wool work. Then I also put one coating of the polyurethane on the inside, and then I let it dry for a day. When I played it, it sounded had a little bit of reverberation. It sounded like the crack was slightly vibrating or something was off. It just didn't sound quite right. So I decided I needed to go to the next level of refinishing it, and decided to use epoxy. I once made a agave didgeridoo with epoxy, and I like the sound of epoxy, so I used epoxy as a liner for the inside of the Didgeridoo, and I added a little bit of copper, gold, and silver leaf to that as well, just a minute amount too. So if you look inside with a flashlight, it has a little bit of a shiny look to it. I'll do that right now to see if you can see inside just a little bit. There we go. So you can see a little bit of the shininess of that leaf that's embedded in the epoxy. And then decided to do it one more final step, which was adding some clear gloss on top of the semi-gloss. And I actually called the Minwax company. They have a free technical support if you bought their products. And I said, hey, can you apply clear gloss on top of semi-gloss? And they said, sure, you can. You just need to sand it slightly. They said it's actually a very delicate process of sanding. You can actually destroy all the layers of polyurethane you just put on the outside of your wood. And they recommended a rougher sandpaper. I decided to use the 4.0 steel wool, and I'm very glad I did. This was fine for slightly roughing up the material. And then I just used a sponge brush, and I'll show my sponge brush. And then I painted it on the Didgeridoo and when it was in the stand in a vertical position with pencils underneath the Didgeridoo and paper underneath that. And then it came out really nicely. I was really happy with that final finish. It looks and feels like glass on it or crystal. It just has a really nice look and feel to it. And then I added beeswax mouthpiece on top, and the mouthpiece is 28 millimeters, which is one of the sizes I like. If it was a very long didgeridoo, if it were a lower note, I might prefer a slightly wider mouthpiece at 30 millimeters, but for the key of E, which is on the shorter side, I prefer the 28 millimeter. And by the way, the length of this didgeridoo is almost my height, 5.5 feet, but the actual note of the didgeridoo ends about 3/4 the way down it. So the actual length for indicating the key is only to about where the color of the wood changes. The bottom part of the didgeridoo is more of a megaphone. So just a few lessons learned from making the didgeridoo. I would have made the V-cut for the crack for the wood glue 1 millimeter wide instead of 3 millimeters. And also would have added a second layer of wood glue after the first layer had dried up. Another lesson learned is I would have used all clear gloss polyurethane rather than using semi-gloss. I just like the look of it a little better. And then I also, it's kind of another lesson learned. It's not really having to do with making or refinishing the didgeridoo, but I just had more of a appreciation of the didgeridoo. So I learned to respect it more by working on it, and I realized that, you know, I'm a very new beginner. I've only been playing daily for a couple months now, and I just have my basic drone and breathing down. And that there's a lot of techniques like wobbles and double wobbles and toots that I can't do smoothly yet. So I just have a lot of respect for the instrument, knowing it's something, you know, that I'll grow into. So now I'm going to share several videos that I made while I was making the didgeridoo. And so you may want to stop the video now unless you really want to get into the detail of how you refinish the didgeridoo. But I mean, I'm just going to add, since I have, you know, it's infinite space on YouTube, I'm just going to go ahead and add those videos in case you want to get more detail on how I refinish them. I just wanted to make a video sharing my process for refinishing this didgeridoo. First, I cleaned it with some soap and water, and then I let it dry for a day. It's pretty dry now, and also put it over a heating register that was about 74 degrees Fahrenheit for an hour, and then let it cool down to room temperature. It's a couple degrees cooler. Now I'm outside in the sun. It's about 60 degrees outside. And earlier today, I had found really fine cracks that went all the way through the wood, and watched some instructional videos on how to repair the cracks. His suggestion was to make them a little bigger, so you can put a mixture of wood glue and wood chips or together, and then you fill the crack like a putty. Here's a second one, and here's a third one. So those are something I'll work on later on. So now I'm going to progressively sand down the old finish, which was a varnish, on the outside, and then just near the top, I'm going to use this little cylindrical sanding device I made to sand the inside just a little bit inside there to make it fresher. So I'm going to progressively sand down the old finish, going from may start at 80 grit, may just right away jump to 120. That might be too strong, but I'm going to go 120, 180, 220, 320, and possibly up to 1500 and 2000. I also have 3 grades of steel wool. I have coarse, which is 3, 0, and then 4-0, but of course medium and super fine. So I'll work with those different materials to get down to the bare wood for this next step. So now I've completed finishing the sanding process. It took 3 hours, and the didgeridoo was very dusty afterwards, so I rinsed it off with a little bit of water and a washcloth, and then I let it dry at room temperature for 24 hours. And earlier I had made these scratches that went all the way, these cracks actually, they went all the way through into a V shape, so the glue will stick to it better. So that's ready to be worked on. So my next step is going to be to add glue to the cracks. There's 3 cracks that I saw I'm going to add glue to, and I'm going to use the Tight Bond 3. This is a waterproof glue that then makes the cracks actually stronger than the wood itself, so it should really stop that crack from going any further. I'm going to mix the glue with about 50% wood chips. I've got a few different colors here that I'm going to pick from. This is actually from this didgeridoo. This is from another didgeridoo where I modified it. And then this is just a lighter colored wood. I think this lighter colored wood actually matches it best. So I'll probably use that. And then I'm going to add a little bit of gold leaf. I have done work with gems and minerals before, adding little bits of crushed gems and minerals to do inlay, but I think it's difficult to sand inlay, so I preferred adding a little metal leaf. But I have 4 types of metal leaf here, some copper, gold, platinum, and silver. And it was just something I had left over from earlier projects a few years ago. I'm excited to see if I can get the copper to show up some when I'm finally done with everything. So I'm going to add I'll add some glue over here, this empty plate, then add some of the wood powder, and then I'll add a little bit of copper, and then I'll fill in the cracks. I'm going to use a little palette knife. You kind of see against my finger, it's pretty small. I've also got a little piece of bamboo to help fill it in, and a couple paint brushes. And then right afterwards, I'll wash off the tools before it dries. And I'm hoping I can glue this crack the first time around and have it come out just right. I think by adding the wood chips, that should prevent the glue from shrinking down too much, so it should be pretty flush with this. And if anything, I hope to just use like a maybe 600 grade sandpaper on top of the glue to sand it down a little bit, and then maybe some extra fine 4-0 steel wool to polish it a little bit. So that's the next step right now. I just wanted to share a new didgeridoo I just received in the mail. Been taking lessons for the last month with Beijerinck in Amsterdam and Holland, and she's a great teacher. I recommend her. Her YouTube channel is under the name Didge Mama. I found her lessons really good, and we met up for some weekly Skype lessons, and she was selling some of her old didgeridoo she didn't play that often. This is one that she's used in a concert for about a decade, and it was up for sale, so I bought it, and it has a really amazing sound. So just wanted to play it for a minute and kind of share it. Well, thanks to Beijerinck for just getting me started on the didgeridoo, for the lessons, and also for shipping me such a beautiful didgeridoo. Here's a video overview of the mouthpiece and didgeridoo. This is before I work on it. So here's the mouthpiece Lise made. It's 28 millimeters wide and 1 centimeter deep, and then it's 5 millimeters for the part that goes above the rim, and 5 millimeters for below, and then it goes between 9 and 10 millimeters wide there. And I noticed that it seemed like it was kind of slightly rounded, like that way. I guess it's a little convex. Just a little bit, and it's a little smaller right there, but it's pretty similar all around, I guess. And I noticed there were some kind of scratches along it. I couldn't tell if they were cracks or scratches. I think they are just scratches, not cracks. And then there was quite a few little chips in it, like right here. It has a really beautiful dark brown color, and it really feels like, almost makes me think of what an elephant tusk would feel like. So my plan is to remove the tape, remove all the varnish, and then sand it using about 8 different grits of sandpaper, and take it down to the bare wood. I think that will make it more of a light brown color, and then I will use some waterproof wood glue and repair any cracks that are visible. And if needed, I'll add a little bit of wood into the holes, and then I will let that dry for a day, and then if needed, sand it, but I'll probably end up doing another 2 or 3 layers of glue to make it even with flush with the edge of the didgeridoo, so it's smooth. And then I will sand down the glue a little bit to make it smooth. and then put tung oil. Also, I'll sand the inside a little bit. It looks just a little bit kind of eroded. There's a little bit of sort of whiteness that's probably from a former waterproofing resin that's just deteriorated. So I'm just gonna sand it with maybe like a 320 grit sandpaper. I want to remove some of the material in there, but I don't want to remove much wood. So I just kind of want to clean it with sandpaper. And then I will use a mixture of mainly tung oil on the inside and outside to give some more moisture to the wood and also give it kind of a glow. And I plan on adding a little bit of eucalyptus oil and bergamot oil to it to give it a little bit of a smell and also just vibration, nice vibration. I think the bergamot is kind of like the love energy, and then eucalyptus is the energy of the earth, of this tree that it came from. And I'll do 2 or 3 coats of the oil, just kind of see how it feels, then let it dry for 1 day, and then I will plan to do 3 coats of water-based oil modified polyurethane by Mini Wax and Semi Gloss, and I will use steel wool 4-0 extra fine in between each layer, and then in the very end I will polish it likely with a jewelry polishing cloth, and then with a just a piece of cotton. And I'm planning to go with the grain. I believe that will be top to bottom, but I'll kind of wait and, as I get down to the wood grain, I'll just confirm that's the way it goes. It may be the opposite way. You can tell by putting the instrument against my cheek. So that's just an overview of the didgeridoo and my current plan for working on it.